I worked on People Under the Stairs. So that was my first horror movie and my first movie with Wes. I was the third assistant props on that, and so that was the first one. So I had already had a little bit of knowledge and relationship with Wes when I did Scream.
Now, for our audience that's going to be watching this, oftentimes the prop guy doesn't get that much play, like on DVD special features. Like, I've worked on productions. Nobody knows, like, give people, our audience, an idea of what props is responsible for.
The prop master is in charge of anything an actor touches. And that could be from, in this case, all the knives, the two things that are set, glasses, watches, wedding bands. And then from there, it just goes from, all the news media, all the school books, backpacks. If there's police officers, all the police belts and guns, weapons, any mechanical rigs on set, and for making things work. A birthday cake could be the worst prop in the world. You have to have 40. You may have to have 50. You'll never know until you've done it and didn't have enough. But a simple prop like that could be your worst nightmare, because if they want to cut it and serve it every take, whatever it be. So
that said, were you guys responsible for the tracking down the right mask for the killer of Scream?
That story has been told quite often, and I have it pretty close to accurate. Other than the mask was found on a location scout. We had already crewed up. They were looking at the Northern California location, and I want to say Marianne Madalena, one of the original producers, found it and showed it to Wes, and it was in a kid's room. It was in the child's room at the scout. Now, they were coming up with conceptual drawings, and how close they were to that, I'm not sure. So they took that mask, and they went to duplicate it. They had K&B make molds and carvings and replicas, and they kept pouring it, but it was coming out of foam latexes and different materials that just, no matter what you did on camera, didn't have that same value. And it really showed. And there's actually a scene in Scream 1 where we didn't have the masks we use today. So there was scenes filmed with the original masks, and slowly we got a lot more, and we were able to work them into the movie, and that's what we see today.
Exactly, and that's that actually. It's a common story for the Scream,
right?
But a lot of people don't actually know that.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember what scenes the K&B mask kind of slipped through on some scenes?
I do. I know that, and this was horrifying, because we had, I don't know, I want to say 6 to 10 masks altogether from K&B, including the original. And I had found the company. It says on the mask, if you look under the mask, it says Fun World. I had contacted Fun World. They gave us the clearance to use them, and then they were scraping together. It wasn't a popular mask. I don't even know. They may have only had a case of them left, at that time. So they were sending it to us, and it was whatever day it was. We were doing the scene with Henry Winkler cutting the mask. And so we'd set him up in order, worst mask to best, and we started with the worst, and he starts cutting with the scissors. And then, take 2, 3, 4, we're getting down. And now FedEx isn't there. My assistant's out front, standing there waiting for the truck to show up. And I think we got down to maybe 2 masks left. And the box showed up, and we were saved. And then, so we've ordered cases ever since then.
What now for a project like this? I mean, you guys have to find the right kind of knife for this thing. I mean, is that something that's specified in the script? For like Kevin writes, a special kind of knife.
Well, Kevin will write. Kevin or whichever writer will write in the script. Butcher knife. Whatever, hunting knife. It could be as specific as that, but then that still gives you a huge range of what to get. So that's what we call a show and tell. Show and tell is where I've already broken down the script, taken highlighted, taken all those props, dropped them in my computer, rentals, purchase, manufacturing, printing, bring that down, make a list. Then I have a meeting with Wes for this case, and we go over each prop, every prop in the movie. And sometimes I can prior to that, I will have time to bring something. So, 10 choices. And if he narrows it down to 3, I can go from there, or we'll narrow it down to choices like this, come back again. It can go on forever. Some people never want to say yes. Thank God Wes does. So in this case, we found that knife. And
describe what kind of knife it is.
The knife is technically, it is from a buck knife, a standard hunting buck knife. And so we got the knife, but now there's things that I need as a prop guy to do with that knife that usually the real prop, whatever it be, doesn't have the physical characteristics that I need, and in this case, Wes is really good because Wes understands physics. He understands heavy things fall, brittle things break. He just understands. So when you have to explain to him, like, this is what I need it to do and this is why I'm going to do this, he'll understand. So for instance, the blade was short. The blade's this long, 6 inches. And in order to make it retractable, 50% of the blade can only go into 50% of the blade. Can't do it more. So you can't have the blade go all the way down without having it double step or come out the back end. So in order to make it look like more blades going in and all that, we decided to make just the blade longer. So then we'd make the blade longer and make the handle 10% larger. None of that will really show to the audience that it's kind of awkward looking, because it's always in the ghost fist. But we have to do certain things like that. So what we end up having is an original knife that we've created to our own specs. Technical, but
no, that's
later.
perfectly fine.
Could we just move the share up about?
There are sequences that proved to be a super challenge, or like kind of went awry.
Yeah. The blood that we use in every single makeup effects, special effects person has their blood, and that's just how it is. Whether they're all the same thing, we'll never know. But when we do a lot of tests too, so there's some anyway. They're sticky. They're really sticky, and that you'll notice in the scene with Skeet Ehrlich at the house in the final, when Sydney first gets away from them in the kitchen, and he's running through the house and he's stabbing everything and breaking everything. If you see, we had in that one take, we gave him a sharp knife, because all the knives are all either dull, rubber, or there's other choices we have. In this one take, we had a sharp one because we needed him to cut the pillow open in the kitchen, and he rips the pillow open and he puts his hand in, and when he comes out, it's just covered in feathers. It's like, because the blood's so sticky. So that was kind of funny. That's I have 8 weeks, 6 weeks prep prior to a movie. And so that's a lot of time to go through every prop and make them work the way that Wes or the camera or whatever needs. So, in that one, and it's pretty simple what we're doing. In this case, our main prop is the knife. So, it wasn't that difficult in that area.
How was do you remember? Were you on set for the opening sequence for Drew and all that stuff?
Yes.
How was she?
That was, there's four crew people, including Wes, that have gone through all 4 movies. Myself, Nick Mastandrea, the AD, Peter Deming, the DP, and Wes. And I can say for myself, I'll speak for myself right now. From reading the first script, I understood what Kevin was trying to get across. I laughed at all the jokes. I liked the killing. And we're working for Wes Craven, who's going to add his, I can look at a movie like that and go, okay, so the script's, 50, 60%, it's good, and then Peter's a great DP, let's give it 10% more. And then Wes, when Wes adds what his last layer, wow, you have, you've gone up to a 80, 90%, this movie could be good, so there's those factors. But at the same time, it was one of those movies you couldn't tell by just reading it. You're like, this is really weird. And we go to film that scene, and that was when it clicked to everyone around, for the most part, was like, whoa, this is scary. I mean, just the idea, like the popcorn. Yeah, I'm gonna go get some, popcorn. No big deal, But then all of a sudden you start seeing it, and the way that Wes frames his shots, and it was the first time we'd really seen the ghost face. And the first time we see the ghost face, it's outside, and he's just coming around that window, and that's amazing. It was really scary. But back to, I have a box. It's called a phone box. And back then, it was this big. It had doorbells on it. It had a place for, a single line, handline phone, office phone, a couple different deals. So big, briefcase. And that was really high tech. And so we have 2 phones hooked into it. Drew's cordless phone and a separate cordless phone for Ghostface. And everything's working fine. Nobody's thinking twice about it. There was a surge in the generator, and it blows my box. Well, everything, I can go on about the phones. We'll talk, just bring up the phones again though. But everything works off the phone. You can't fake this. 9 out of 10 times, we can fake a phone call. We can have a script supervisor or someone reading from off camera, even out loud. They don't even need to be on another phone. In this movie, the phone, like Ghostface has to be able to see on a monitor and use his timing with Wes, because everything with Wes is timing. So it's really important that the phones work live. So what we had to do was, we were lucky that the house had 2 lines. We plug the phones into the house lines, and we start using the house lines. That's working out well too. Then, at one scene, Drew needs to make phone calls, but she doesn't need anyone else on the other line. In fact, no one's supposed to be. It's the police. So she starts dialing 911. 911, hang up. 911, screaming, hang up. 911, scream, hang up. Little do we know, the phone, I didn't unplug the phone. She's calling the police, and it's finally like we're in the middle of a take, and the phone starts ringing, and we're like, what's going on? Why is the phone ringing? And we pick it up, and it's the police asking what the hell we're doing, and why do we keep calling them? So,
wow, holy shit. That's great. Big point. Without cell phones, Scream pretty much would not work, or something like that.
And technology is the answer. Yes, Scream wouldn't work without a phone. The phone has to be there, and yet, but the technology that has gone in the last 10 years, is mind-boggling. You have to understand, we didn't use a cell phone in Scream 1. It was, and a cordless phones weren't new, but we actually had the newer version of those cordless phones. It was no longer the pull-out antenna, it was the wire antenna, and that allowed us to do what, have Drew move around the room, all that. That's so important. Communication's key. So Scream 2 comes in. Cell phones have gotten from bricks down to, a common size. But yet they were big enough compared to Scream, like this Scream 4, definitely, that on Scream 2, I was able to take the phone, take it apart, take a walkie-talkie, take just the speaking portion of the walkie-talkie, put it into the phone, and then wire it so it's always open. So now I have an open line that I can talk to. That's not true. It's the opposite. You could hear into that phone. So now this phone can hear. Okay? So that's all it's good for. And then Roger had the speaking walkie-talkie. So Roger could talk into that person so they could hear it. And when they speak into the microphone, which Roger's wearing context. So in order to make that full loop, it was a lot of work. And that's, so for every single phone, there was a different chore like that. And even as technology gets better, it also gets harder because, it's really hard to explain why somebody can't just pick up a phone and call you, and why we can film it. And you're in there, I'm here. They're like, well, there's a delay. Well, tell him to go outside. If we don't see the second person, there's not really a delay. But on film, there's the delay. In the recording, now they can match that up, in post. But for the actor, there's still a delay, and it creates, actually for the camera, there's a delay. So, and actually the delay is in the monitor that the director's watching, not, so, and then you're like, but it doesn't make sense. And Wes and Nick, the AD and director, their one of their favorite lines is always, "We put a man on the moon and we can't, why can't we, and that made sense until I looked up the other day how many people died trying to the Apollo, so 3 guys died and $200 million back in the 50s. There's a slight difference, but
Let's talk about the voice box. Talk about its progression from, because we're going to get into this, from a regular, talk about finding the right kind of voice box, that is plausible in the first movie, to the magic voice changing voice box from Scream 3 to Scream 3.
What was Scream 1? I want to say was an aluminum, was a disc about yay big with LED lights that went up and down, and they made it. They went up and down, but there was actually a button that they had to press, and I want to say it was random, but it may not have even been random. So they literally, when they wanted to talk, they had to fake their little pressing their finger. It was and it broke constantly, and it took the batteries went out like that, and it took about 5 minutes to unscrew it and put a new battery in it. So it was a complete and total wreck of a prop, but. It was plausible.
Did one exist? Did kind of a voice box at that time change?
Nope. There was no voice changer. There was no box at that time. It was even too big to go into the mask. If you look at the size of it, technology's helped. Now there's computer chips that make that very possible. It is a possibility. What do we do for the voice changing box? At that point, there was actually Darth Vader helmed by Scream 2 and 3. I believe there was even, that's one of the things. If you can explain it in a meeting of people, then we just need a visual prop to make it work. So by that point, there was a Darth Vader mask, I remember, that allowed you to sound like Darth Vader. So as soon as that was able to be proven, it didn't matter what we put in the mask, as long as that technology existed at that time.
Did anybody at any given time go, this is really peculiar because this thing can mimic the sound of, Courtney or David or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, those conversations happen, and sometimes, again, when we come back, when we get to Wes himself, he'll say, it's always plausible. If it's completely implausible, then maybe we can keep going about it. But we will talk about it. And once we get to a point in the conversation, he said, if I wanted to film reality, I'd make documentaries. At some point we have to get away from, and explain it. We did I believe we created a computer program that patched into the box that had people's voices recorded on it. So we try to explain it out, but at some point you have to
suspend
disbelief.
Yeah. How did the challenges change from Scream to Scream? I mean, you've been on all 4. I mean, from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. What did anything get more difficult or get more challenging?
Well, I think one of the challenges, happens, is the fact that people have 60-inch televisions now, HD, Blu-ray, stop it at every frame they want to, and so we're stuck. We shoot out of order a lot of time. There's nothing we can do about that, and there may be blood here in one take. Well, that's because naturally the blood splattered and hit you there, but we couldn't have it in there through every take because we didn't film it that way in the scene we did before, so therefore we have to remove it. Well, there's no way we can fix that stuff, so, it's very important that we take continuity really serious as best we can, so Scream 1, Polaroid camera, and I'm talking... Polaroid's $1 a piece, and we probably shoot, 15, 20 packs, I don't know, thousands of dollars worth of Polaroid. Thousands. We did book after book after book, 4 books, filled with Polaroids, scene number, continuity, Sharpie marks on them, little notes, everything. And now we can take digital photographs. We can even take a digital video next to the camera and walk over, download it on our computer, blow it up as big as we want, and so we can keep things as close as we can. So continuity and the fact that everybody can break every scene down that they want to. And they're welcome to if they want to too, because there's nothing we can do about it. There's a reason. There's usually an actual explanation why things aren't the same way. Performance outweighs anything. If the scene was good and it was real, it's in the camera, it's in the film, it's in the movie, and whether their button was unbuttoned or whether something, it's there. So
you're in a position, you interact with everyone. Who is kind of like the fresh blood? Who was the most fun to work with? Who seemed like they were having the greatest time?
Remind me, who are we down?
We got the regulars, and then the newcomers are like Timothy Olyphant, right. Jerry O'Connell, Laurie Metcalf.
Again, you know what? That one again was fresh. We'd filmed. We went right into the next one, and again, I think everyone in that one jumped right in and knew and it was fresh. The whole genre was fresh, and they were near the same age, and as the stars. So that was kind of good. They were all friends. As we've gone to the next, level, they're not in high school anymore. It's not as cute. Or even now, we brought in a new high school group, so they're looking up to them. So there's been different dichotomies. But by Scream 2, I think it was about straight across the board. And it was really easy. Jerry O'Connell is a great guy to be around. We've stayed kind of friends, but
how does the from my understanding on Scream 2, for you, how does it affect you, and if this even affected you? Did the kind of script changes or the secrecy of the script with which they kind of held back, how does that affect you, and what happened? I mean, did they purposely hold back some stuff from you guys?
I remember, again, memory going. That was, by that point, we realized that everything had to be a secret. There's no way around it. So scripts came out at that point. Today, what they do is they can watermark everybody's script. My script comes across, JP Jones, prop master, in a watermark across every single page. Obviously, I could take the time and type the whole thing out, but that would be... back then, they didn't have that, and it had this brown swath. It was actually some paper from the tobacco industry to camouflage their memos. I mean, in order to read it, you couldn't highlight it, you couldn't mark it, so we had to sit there, you had to especially hold it up to read it in the light. And they held out the end of the scene. Again, if it's a prop-driven portion of the script, they'll give me the pages, Wes will, sit me down. So, I mean, it didn't affect me as much as other people, but it has... Within the 4 movies, there's been times where it's affected. Yeah.
Well, I heard particularly with 3, were you privy to any of kind of the major script changes, because they brought in Aaron Kruger instead, and there were some major story changes from my understanding. Do you remember any of that at all?
I do. I remember that. I remember it, but I don't remember what script changes they were and how it affected us. Again, within the range. See, a lot of the time the script comes down to the story. Was it story or dialogue? I can't remember. So that's the difference, whether it's story or dialogue. A lot of times there'll be a script change and someone will just go, "Don't worry, dialogue," and I won't really get involved in it. But for the most part, I had the knives on day one, and that's.
Well, they had to with Scream 3. They're recreating a lot of. Well, they had a whole stage that was set up to look like the original Scream. Was that were you able to pull upon some of the old stuff from the first Scream, or did you have to just start from square one and go, I got to decorate Sydney's room all over again, and so on and so on?
Again, so I'm hand props versus set dressing. So that's predominantly set dressing. And again, everything goes into storage after a movie. For the most part, we get it. We have a certain price limit where everything below $100 can go to garbage wherever. Everything over or hero props go into boxes, inventoried, back to them. Well, within those movies, it was all lost actually by Scream 4, so we had none of it. But I'm not sure in my memory that they were that sure they were going to make all those movies, and how the script was. So things like what happened in the props in her room and all that were probably not saved because, who knew what the script was for Scream 3? So, it takes up a lot of space to store all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, from when I spoke to Wes just prior to doing Scream 4, he just said on Scream 4, he was like, well, it's nice to actually have a script this time as opposed to Scream 3 because it just seemed like it was so run and gun and like things were changing and coming in. Script changes and stuff like that. It seemed like out of the three, it just seemed like the more disorganized of the three.
And it was. Okay. Scream 3 was, script-wise, was much more confusing and unorganized than the other two. But again, you got to give it to Wes because on that end, he's the commander, he's the chief, he's in charge, and he communicates. So I was able to get what I needed, the information I needed from Wes.
So, and going back to the original question, because we were 3, any great scenes or anything you remember? Any particular actors fucked up or anything like that?
I know there are, and I can't. Scream 3 was awesome. Scream 3 was a lot of fun to make. It was for whatever reason, we were outside of the studio, we were in Hollywood. It was just fun. I enjoyed that one a lot. I don't remember as much, unless you jogged my memory, like little things like that on 2 and 3. But
I think that the greatest, one of the great scenes is, from Scream 2 is the finale. Of the stage stuff. I mean, all of that. The reveals and stuff like that.
Right.
When we were talking we talked to Elise Neal, who who was originally, from my understanding, she was supposed to be the original killer. So that we were talking about how that might have changed things a little bit, which was cool. So.
That and again, I mean, I guess everybody at some point during the script writing, I'm sure everyone was the killer, in some version on some pegboard. I don't know, but it makes sense. I mean, I went into. Well, now I got to stop there.
Scream 4. Yeah.
Scream 4. No.
Well, what? I'm trying to think of anything else we wanted to cover here. Let me see.
Scream 5. You should see Scream 5.
Was there any palpable change in terms of atmosphere? Because I know that they brought in Aaron. That might not have affected you. They brought in Aaron Kruger instead of Kevin Williamson writing. Was Kevin on set often for Scream 1 and 2?
Yeah, Kevin was around. I've known Kevin forever. I've known Kevin for a long time. I actually worked with a director that Kevin worked for prior to him being a writer. Well, no, I guess he was always a writer, but before somebody bought this script. So it was very strange. I've known him for a long time. Having worked on People Under the Stairs with Wes and Nick, and Stuart, one of the original producers, and then knowing Kevin, and then I knew Peter. So it was actually very strange that like a lot of people, I'd done House Party with Peter Deming years prior to that. So, but Kevin, Kevin's dialogue is just better than anybody's. I'll just say it. I mean, I action-wise, it may bore him. I don't know. They've brought in people to do scenes like that. But as far as getting the quick dialogue, understanding the demographic group, I love him. I love his writing.
Well, talking a little bit about Kevin, were you there during the process? Did he kind of give you a sense of what was coming with Scream, like when he was hashing it out? Because from my understanding, his story is he went off, wrote it, came back to town, then put it on the market and stuff. Did he kind of give you inside scoop on what he was up to?
No, I've heard this story that's how it happened. Last time, not a thing to do. This is my last chance. Sit down, get it out, and Kathy. I guess it was Kathy, probably found it and bought it. And that's the story I have. So, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if he was calling up, hey, man, I'm ordering.
No. Again, it was so weird because actually Kathy Conrad I knew Wes and Nick Massandrea. So she's like, oh, you know them already. Oh, that's great. And then they bring in Peter Deming. And I'm friends with Peter Deming. And then Kevin comes in, and I know Kevin. And Kathy's like, who are you? I was really young back then. I still am, but so.
Cool. Anything you want to add anything?
Wes.
Oh yes, yeah. Talking about no, Wes, absolutely. I mean, how does the man? I'm curious, like just the evolution of how he's changed over the years. I mean, from especially working on People Under the Stairs all through the '90s, to he capped off the decade with Scream 3.
Right.
So.
Wes is, I mean, this one's. I'll do this for Nick. Because it's ass kissing. I mean, he's literally the smartest guy in the room, no matter what. So in my position, that's key. When you explain technically why something can or can't work, he understands. It's not a matter. He doesn't have to see it. You don't have to build it to prove to him that it's not going to work. If you're like, it's not going to work, But he's so mechanical and understands it. If he says, I think you could do it, it's not a brush off, go get this done, get out of my face. It's more of, I have faith in you that you could get it done. Because if it's impossible, he's not going to ask you to do that. He's the funniest guy in the room, most well-read. I always joke if I don't know something, I'm just like, I got to call Wes. I mean, and this goes on with my assistant Skip, who's been with me for at least 4 other Wes movies. I'll just be like, I got to call Wes in the middle of a production meeting. And they're like, what? And I'm like, well, I'll just call Wes Craven. He'll know the answer to that. He's the gentleman. He's everything. I mean, and, it's the timing. It comes down to the timing. And a lot of times, having made so many movies, not with Wes or with Wes, everything, there's things that you could just automatically go, but wait. And he'll just look at you. And that's when he's never raised his voice, and but you'll look at you and you'll know right then, how did I even question? I was questioning him, and he just knows better. He's that smart. So, and he loves what he's doing, and it's genius.
Would you agree that by the Scream movies, I mean, he kind of really just hones every theme that he's ever explored in his previous movies, and just the craft of making a good horror movie?
I mean, it's innate. It's in him. He understands it, and it's little teeny, things that aren't on the page. It's as simple. They're written. We've prepped it, but on the moment, he'll just be like, "Hold back for a second, and that little teeny bit. Or when he's talking with young actors who jump on a line too quick, the scene's already in his head and it's already cut. Because he's going to be there when they cut every inch of it and every frame. And he'll be like, no, don't use that word there. Even though the sentence is da la 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 la, break that up right there, because I'm going to come in with something right there and I'm going to give him, and so it's there. He just knows it. And he knows exactly what he's going to do in the editing room. And you hear, people who are watching this will have heard all that before. And not about Wes. They've seen it on the back of every video that they've ever watched in their life. But the reality is, I've been in the rooms. In most cases, it's only true when you're talking about Wes. I mean, it just is. He really has it. And again, it's a pleasure to work with him, And I know on Scream 1 was one of the first, I would say, I did 2 movies as a prop master prior to that. This is a big one. And I screwed up on week 1. I made a mistake. We had 2 sets. We had the school set on a stage, and then we had the exterior of the school set. At the end of the day, Sidney Prescott puts her book bag in the locker, closes it. No big deal, except for we forgot to get it out. We go to the school. We're ripping my truck apart. We can't find it, and all of a sudden I realize, I'm like, this book bag's 45 minutes that way. That's an hour and a half. We're about to film the scene, and I have to walk up to him, and I'm like, this is humbling. It's huge. And you're like, Wes, I really messed up. There's someone on their way, but this is what happened. And, it's just like, so what are you going to do to fix it? And it's quickly, just like that. And you're like, if we film it this way, if we do this, I have a backpack that looks like that, we'll get it. By that time, it'll be back. He's like, okay, so that's the end of it. I don't think that's like week 2. I don't even think about it. I got invited to the final dinner with all the cast and the producers. It was kind of weird. I actually turned it down because I would have been the only crew member. And Courtney's like, no, you're coming to this dinner. You're part of this. And I go there, and Wes stood up and he said a toast to every single person in the room individually. And then he repeats this story Like, I knew I was okay and I trusted him because when he came up and he was honest to me and he just told me what was gone and then he fixed it. And I mean, that was 2 months earlier. So, that was like when I knew that, since then he's filmed one movie out of town where he's the director. But I've done every single movie for him. Red Eye, Cursed, prepped another movie with him. And hopefully until he stops directing, I can say the same.
Awesome. And I wanted to ask you about the finding the wardrobe.
I actually made those, but I forget how that came about. I remember having to make a rubber one and the stainless. Was there a story you heard?
Well, I'm curious because that's a nice touch because in Scream 3 she's wearing them. Which I thought, I was wondering if that was, a cognizant decision on your part. If you remember, hey, we should probably have her wearing these.
I mean, I can't say yes, except for the answer is yes. I mean, very few things happen on accident. A lot of the stuff is, minus finding the Ghostface mask, but things like that are discussed. Wes is big on foreshadowing and bringing things back, and so I'm sure that was, but I don't actually remember. I do remember scrambling to get it for Scream 3, and my assistant Skip.
Can you add the frat letters just so we can?
Oh yeah, I remember the frat letters that we used. The frat letters in Scream 2. That's where we created it, and we had to make sterling silver ones, and we had to make rubber ones because she hit what's his name in the face with them. And then we used him again in Scream 3. Well, Skip Crank, who's my assistant, was the manager of the prop house that built all the knives, built the voice changer, all that for Scream 1. And between Scream 1 and the middle of 2, he had left there and started working on set. So by Scream 3, he was my full-time assistant, and lo and behold, I need the letters, but they were lost in the box, the storage room, wherever, like Raiders of the Lost Ark room. There's some place like that that's just filled with props. Trust me. And he's like, oh, well, I have one in my toolbox. I made an extra one for myself to keep. So, and that's happened with Skip on numerous occasions because, he's the collector. He's the horror movie. That's his world. That's his life outside of, just being lucky enough to work with Wes and make him. So we've actually relied on him to have that or know people who have found or have specific props and how they've got them. We don't really ask. I've even, on this last movie, I could say on 4, I was able to get something from somebody a collector who had it, and how he got it or why he had it, I don't know. But it was important enough for us to ask him to use it, to double it, copy it, and then get it back to him. So Skip's is a resource that we've counted on quite often.
I've heard a lot of different, the costumes and where the costumes go and all that stuff. That's hilarious.
The abyss of the unknown. We don't know where everything goes.
Unbelievable. Well, very cool, man. If there's anything... Huh?
Favorite scary movie?
Oh, yeah. We're asking everybody, do you have a favorite scary movie? And it doesn't have to be Scream. It doesn't have to be any Scream.
Yeah. My favorite scary movie is Burnt Offerings. And why? I'm not even a huge fan of the genre. Not to, my wife is, but I was, however old I was when I watched that the first time, I had nightmares. And it may have been the only movie that I've had nightmares about because of the age when I watched it. I could probably watch it today. I don't even know. But I know for a fact that when I think of Burnt Offerings, I get scared shitless. So.
I just saw it for the first time on a Halloween, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, really?
Nice. That's a great movie.
Yeah, that's a great movie. It was a great movie. Oliver Reed trying to kill his kid in the pool. I was like, what?
What?
What the fuck is going on here?
It just gets more bizarre.
Yeah, it's such a weird movie.